For instance, a few days after her death, I was out for dinner with a friend, and I said, I would just like to get a sign that she's really around and that she can actually hear me and hear us. And in that instant, a young girl suddenly jumped up and called the first name of my sister across the whole restaurant. We were just looking at each other and starting to cry and to laugh as well, because that was so bizarre.
Frau Dorian, Sie sind Sängerin und Schauspielerin.
Miss Dorian, you are a singer and actor, and in an exceptionally sudden series of fateful events, you lost your whole family in a very short time. Would you be so kind as to tell us what happened?
Also, meine Geschichte oder diese Geschichte hat 2012 begonnen.
My story, this story, starts in 2012 when I lost my mother to cancer. Then in 2015, my little sister died totally unexpected for no apparent reason at all. And a year later, my father died. It was very hard. That all the people really close to me, the three most important people in my life, had gone, and also close together in time, because he had hardly come out of grieving for one person when the next one passed on. It really wasn't comprehensible to the brain, let alone the emotions. That really needs a lot of time to emotionally deal with it all, so to speak, digest it all emotionally.
How did you deal with your grief? What was important to you? What was helpful?
What I've actually found out is that what really does help is talking about it. A lot of people don't do that, but for me, really, that's number one. Talking about it. Even if it's really hard. And you don't have to talk about it with friends if it's too hard or if you don't feel like it. Just look for someone to talk to, a stranger or a therapist, whatever. Just someone you personally, honestly feel like talking to, who seems to be the right person to talk to. To talk about it, to speak about what had happened, to let all the important events pass through your memory and through your conscious mind again. I think that's the most important thing, definitely.
Who was the right person for you in that respect?
To be honest, I was not that picky about it. I have put a bundle of grief onto a lot of people, and I have burdened a lot of others with it, quite selfishly, I suppose. And I have a very nice therapist who has helped me over a couple of years, and it took a long time before I would trust her as well. There was a time after my mom's death when I literally woke up in tears every single day. It was emotionally so extremely draining, and friends insisted on my finding some help, finding a therapist, finding someone to talk to. And I have finally taken that step, even though I was sitting in her office going, I can't do that, that's not going to work for me at all. But I got over it and started seeing her. It was hard to overcome my resistance and understand everybody who has some resistance against it. But it was the most important and healing thing for me.
What else was helpful to you? Observations that you made?
I observed that a lot of people had a problem with it. They were hesitant to come up to me, to meet me, and to address me. They were even hesitant to call me on the phone and get in touch with me. A lot of people among friends and family told me later on that I have helped them overcome the hesitation, the fear of contact you normally have in such a situation. They told me later that they were sitting in front of me not knowing what to say, and I actually made it easy on them because I was so open and honest about it. And I have found that, even though I have experienced so many losses now, I also see myself sitting in front of people and being absolutely speechless and not knowing what to say to them, to help them in their grief. Because there's nothing that really could be of help or of consolation. But it's also possible to articulate that and to say, I have no idea what to say to you. I'm absolutely overwhelmed. Tell me how you are doing. Or what could we do together? The worst thing is, for me at least, that was my experience, not get in touch. or for people to distance themselves and to say, she needs space, or she needs her own space and quiet now, or I don't want to annoy her. That was for me the worst. At any rate, that is my experience.
Your father, Alfred Šramek, was a well-known opera singer, and, as far as I know, he has had a near-death experience in his lifetime. Did he share that with you? What did that do to you?
Ich habe mich vor dem Tod meiner Mutter mit dem
I was never interested in anything about death or dying or near-death experiences ever before my mother died. And then my father had this near-death experience actually already a couple of years before the death of my mom. And we always, I wouldn't say we smiled about it. I wouldn't say we raised our eyebrows over it. We certainly took him seriously when he talked about it. But this was all like, he talked about it and we listened and then we said, aha, or okay, and that was that. But then suddenly we were more interested in it because my mom's death had caused greater interest in topics related to death and dying. At least in my little sister and me. And then I confronted him with it, and I wanted to get to know everything about it and asked him to sit down and tell me all about it. Like what had happened exactly. So he told me he had had sudden acute kidney failure, sitting in his car. He had a blackout next to my mother, who panicked.
While he was driving?
No, he was just sitting in his car getting ready to start the engine. After singing at a funeral, when he realized that it might be a good idea to call his family doctor, who told him to go to a hospital at once. Because my dad's kidney checkup results were always so bad. And that must have caused a panic attack in my dad, and he had a blackout. So he was knocked out for some time. And he told me suddenly everything was absolutely calm. And that he saw a glowing globe in front of him. And in the background, a lot of green and a beautiful green meadow underneath it and behind it. He told me it was unbelievably beautiful. But he couldn't shove that globe to the side, couldn't move that glowing globe out of the way. He described it as a glowing globe with very bright but not glaring light, very warm but not unpleasantly warm. My mother told me later that he constantly stroked the top of his wrist. He wasn't aware of that movement. My mom was very aware of it, but he wasn't. It really was an instinctive act. And what he told me later on was that he went out of his body at that spot and his skin was keeping him back, bouncing off his wrist like a rubber band.
Did this change the way you thought about death and dying after your mum had passed?
Absolutely. But it took some time. I had been dealing with the topic 6 months after my mom's death in my therapy. I call it therapy, but it wasn't therapy in the classic sense. It was more like grief counseling. Anyway, I was getting interested in near-death experiences and after-death contacts. Not only me, but also my little sister, who was so impressed by it that she had actually changed her profession, her career path because of it. Because she had always been struggling with finding the right profession for her. And then that growing interest pushed her in the right direction. She was a lot more impressed by it than I was, and she actually changed her career and decided she wanted to become a professional undertaker, and that she wanted to spend her life dealing with death.
You have just mentioned after-death contacts. As many studies show, a lot of people have had such contacts, feeling a presence after the death of a loved one. Have you experienced that as well?
Not with my parents, but with my sister. My sister died absolutely out of the blue. Her death was totally sudden and unexpected. Nobody could have seen it coming. She went home, and in her bathroom she just fell down and died of a heart attack. And she was only 26 years old. It was something nobody could have expected. And it was one of the first nights after her death. I had an unbelievably impressive and clear and meaningful dream. I am aware that it was a dream, but it was extremely realistic, and it felt as if I was actually watching a movie instead of just having a dream. This dream was keeping me busy for a long time. It was important for me to deal with it. It stayed vividly in my memory until this very day. And I will never forget it for the rest of my life. I'm absolutely positive about that. We met each other. We were both in a dark room. I couldn't say where we were, but she was weeping and I was weeping, and we were just falling into each other's arms. We were both at an absolute loss of understanding what this was all about. And we were both like, what's going on and why now and all so sudden. 2 or 3 days later, I was having the same dream again. And it was in a dark something, again, a dark room. And this time there was a bed and we were both lying on that bed and facing each other. And this time it was just me who was still crying. And my little sister was absolutely calm and okay. And she told me, Katharina, don't worry about me. Everything is okay. And it is all right as it is. And please stay calm. I'm always with you. Anyway.
And that was the final farewell scene between the two of you?
Obviously it was. But I have a lot of little after-death contacts with her in everyday life. Just really startling moments. For instance, a few days after her death, I was out for dinner with a friend. And I said, I would just like to get a sign, just a sign that she's really around and that she can actually hear me and hear us. And in that instant, a young girl suddenly jumped up and called the first name of my sister across the whole restaurant. We were just looking at each other and starting to cry and to laugh as well, because that was so bizarre. And we were both really like, that can't be true. That's not happening for real. And it was extremely impressive. I mean, how many first names are there on Earth, and how likely is it that this girl happened to call just that very name at that particular moment? That was one of those instances. And the other one was a lot more intense, actually. Because I was selling my parents' house and I had to clean it out as well. So I was selling some things over the internet, among them a little nightstand. A young girl contacted me and she had actually the same first name as my little sister Johanna.
Was ich schon mal sehr interessant fand, sage ich jetzt mal. Lustig, die heißt genauso wie meine Schwester. Und wir sind irgendwie nie auf einen Zweig gekommen, also keine Zeit.
And we just couldn't find a date to arrange for her to pick up that nightstand. We had both busy lives and demanding schedules, and so she asked me if it was a problem if her sister came to pick it up instead. And I said not at all. And then her sister sent me a short message saying, I will be there in 10 minutes to see you, Katharina. And I was thinking, there are also 2 sisters that have exactly the same names as my sister and me. Also, the older one is called Katharina and the younger one is called Johanna. That's not possible. How odd is that? And I broke out in tears, and then I said to myself, I have to calm down and get ready. She's going to be here in 10 minutes. And when she showed up, I asked her if I had got that right, if it's correct that she's the older sister called Katharina and her younger sister is called Johanna. And then she replied, yes. And I told her a little bit about me and my story and about my sister. And then she started to cry and she hugged me and she told me she didn't believe in coincidences, but that she was sure that this was no coincidence and that she thinks it's a sign from my sister. This was such a precious moment for me, such a beautiful encounter that I was deeply thankful for. And in the evening, we exchanged some more short messages. Because how rare is such a situation where some stranger is actually so empathetic and understanding of what the situation is actually about. That was a wonderful encounter for me and a special moment in my life.
Wie haben Sie den Tod Ihres Vaters erlebt?
When your father died, was this also something unexpected? Or were you able to accompany him toward the end?
I was able to accompany him. There were just the two of us after my mom's and my sister's death. My dad and I had had a rather difficult relationship. It didn't all go smoothly, just because we were so much alike. But we actually only realized that during the 1 year that we spent alone, just the two of us. We actually became friends during that last year, and that wasn't the case before. We also finally had a chance to really get to know each other. And I told him, after the death of my sister, you will see there's a reason why we are left over. And that's how it was. During his final months, I also lived together with him in his house, because it was not possible for him to live on his own anymore. He was still performing on stage, but I had to take him there in his car, I had to accompany him onto the stage behind the curtains, and after his performance I was waiting for him behind the curtains and taking him to his stage cloakroom. I was always extremely nervous whether he could actually make it. But there is a saying that willpower is able to move mountains. And he did move mountains. I have no idea how he did it, but he did. His very last performance is available on YouTube. It's Tosca with Jonas Kaufmann, my favorite opera. I was looking at it last summer, and I have to say, it's overwhelming for me to see him. The way he was walking across the stage. And it's heartbreaking. But those few last months together we had were some of the most important and educational months of my life. What we experienced with each other, it was all very intense and formative. It was extremely important for both of us. Several times I reached my own limits. I also find a kind of motherly gene in myself which enabled me to still function with very little sleep.
Wo man einfach mit wenig Schlaf wirklich noch Berge versetzen kann.
And that was also an experience that was absolutely new to me. What the palliative care team told us, and all the doctors there told us, was that they have very rarely met people that were able and willing to deal with all matters concerning death so honestly and openly. We just talked about it very openly. Also my dad, he spoke about everything with an open mind as long as he was able to talk. He always addressed everything frankly and directly in a straightforward manner that actually sometimes even was hard on doctors. They sometimes felt overwhelmed and didn't know how to deal with that, because that was so out of the ordinary for them. I had some very good and interesting talks with the palliative care nurses there as well, and I was eager to understand and grant all wishes that my dad still had during his last phase of his life. Even against my convictions, or even if I thought to myself, I doubt if this is a good idea, but I deliberately did what he wanted. Even if it was against my convictions. I thought that's what it is like right now, and I must go through with it, just out of respect for him. But I always let him know if I didn't share his views. But I have also told him, if that is what you want, it's okay. He was getting dialysis regularly, and in the end he decided he didn't want to get it anymore. He just didn't want to go anymore. And I told him, Dad, I have no idea how you can make such a decision. And I think I couldn't make such a decision, but we'll do it as you wish. I'm here for you. But it didn't mean I had no panic. I had a lot of fear, especially because I was the one who was left behind. And what helped me during those weeks was the thought, first of all, stay calm. Then secondly, everything happens so that you can learn how to deal with things. For instance, I was extremely afraid of the moment when I had to decide to let him be taken from home to the palliative care station. because he always wanted to die in a hospital and not at home. But my dad was a very strong character. I asked him, how should I make such a decision? Because I had the impression that I wouldn't stand a chance against the strength of his convictions. And getting closer to that point of no return, this caused a lot of panic and stress for me, especially at night, because you can hardly just let go of worries and having all kinds of scenarios in your head. I just kept telling myself everything will work out in such a way that you and your dad can handle the situation very well. That's how I rescued myself. That's how I calmed myself down. And in the end, it came true. Because he decided it for himself. He came to a point where he told me, I'm not feeling safe at home anymore. So I didn't have to make any such difficult decisions. It was all solved. In the end, it was all ultimately calm, relaxed, and peaceful.
How was your father doing during the last weeks of his life? Did his near-death experience give him some support?
My dad always used to say dying is easy. I've already experienced it once. But in the end, he told me I've had no idea how hard it actually is. In his final phase, he was getting pretty upset, even aggressive. Not against me, but I felt an underlying aggression against the situation. He didn't want for it to go on anymore. He wanted it to stop. When he couldn't speak anymore, I was sitting at his bedside and telling him, that's now how it works, Dad. You can't just force yourself to die. That's not something you can control with your mind. That's not possible. It's the body that does that. Or I don't know what it is. At any rate, it's not controlled by our mental sense of reason, not by our intellect. Of course, it's an easy thing to say when you're just sitting at his bedside. But nothing better than that came to my mind. I admit that honestly. I tried to calm him down and help him to relax. And that is how it was. He died peacefully in his sleep.
There is still a big taboo about death in our Western society. How did you feel about the talks you had with friends and family? Did it occur to you that it's actually easier for you to talk about it with your artist friends?
I don't think so, but I was like a steamroller. The people around me were confronted with it very fervently. Later on, I often felt really sorry about it, asking myself why I had done it again. Why do I constantly talk about it? But it wasn't possible to hold it back. I can't explain it. Sometimes I tried to apologize later on to the people involved, but they always told me that they didn't mind at all and that they were interested in it, and that they were happy to talk about it in such an interesting way. Of course, in my whole surroundings, I am the one with the most experiences of it. But I do have friends who have also lost a parent or sibling, but not one of them has addressed the topic so frankly. I think I was reckless about it sometimes, but in a good way.
What attitude do you personally have after all those experiences? Are you afraid of dying one day?
No, not at all. I'm not afraid of death at all anymore. I was at a funeral a couple of weeks ago and I found out that I can't cry anymore. I don't see death as a final farewell anymore. Of course, the deceased person is not physically there anymore, but rather like a gateway. And sometimes I think of the deceased, oh, they have already done it. But not from a depressed point of view, not at all. It's hard to put it in words. I'm not afraid anymore. I'm very much looking forward to meeting them all again, which also doesn't come from a sad or a depressed or a negative corner. I mean that in a positive and joyful way, in a good way, full of the joys of life.
What kind of influence have all your experiences had on the course of your life?
I've always had phases. That strong depression of grief had me in its grip, of course, every time after one of those huge losses. But it was always a little bit different. And then you are sitting there and thinking, what am I still doing here? Why? Can I please just go as well? I can't see any point in it. And that doesn't make any sense at all either. But I've also learned that life is something beautiful and that you must enjoy it to the fullest. And that it's important to see new things. I've learned to enjoy the world, to enjoy traveling, to enjoy this outlook, this view of the world. And I'm looking forward to the new encounters. I'm hungry for new input, hungry for new events and experiences in my life in the future. It has caused a hunger for life.
Would you say that those experiences have had an influence on your artistic career?
Insofar as that I'm dealing with things on stage a lot differently. I've become more relaxed. There's very rarely anything that really makes me upset. That's something else. The insight that nothing is as important as we think it is. Because it's actually often quite ridiculous. Instead, I stay calm and okay. But concerning the way I play, I think it has brought a lot of depth and maturity that I didn't have before and that you can't expect before you go through something like that. Especially maturity. If you have to go through that, you have to function. Especially considering the situation with my dad. We were just the two of us. It was in the time of his illness that I learned the most. It was evidently the most educational time for both of us. I would say for him too.
In your appearance on Show Wheel, you mentioned a sentence saying, if you aren't sexy enough, you go and play the good works. Are you happy? Are you content with your job as an actress? Do you have any plans for the near future?
Yes, there are plans and wishes in my head. But I will keep them to myself. No, I really love my job and I couldn't imagine any other job in the world for me. I love being on stage. I love telling stories. I love working together with other people. There's nothing that is more fun. I love to show emotions on stage. I love to transport emotions. I love to make people laugh or make people cry. To really touch them emotionally. There's nothing more beautiful for me.
Is there a performance where you felt most at ease?
No, those moments, those phases come up every once in a while. And then I have phases when I feel like everything's too much. But I think that's normal. Everyone knows such phases.
You have a special interest in French songs, French chansons.
Yes, chansons and Paris. I love the city of Paris.
Are you planning on doing some performances there, singing chansons?
No, not at all. That's just my hobby. I should say I love going to Paris. I love the language, even though I don't speak it all too well. But I enjoy the flair of that city.
Miss Dorian, thank you so much for sharing your experiences with us and all the best for your future.
To you as well, and I have to thank you.